But it should be noted that the administration actually hasn't prosecuted any of these cases that were brought to them regarding companies who have violated sanctions. I think only one case since 1996 has actually been prosecuted, because these sanctions really would hurt U.S. allies primarily in Europe and Japan. These aren't sanctions against Iran itself. But the Europeans, of course, have now started ratcheting up their own sanctions under pressure from the administration. And the administration has also pursued, the multilateral sanctions through the United Nations Security Council. 4 resolutions have been passed, 3 of them imposing sanctions since 2005. But really, I think we have to look at it best from Iran's point of view in terms of their history of coercion by foreign powers and whether or not sanctions would work. And I think if we look at Iran's history and from their psychological point of view, I think people would realize if they actually had an inkling of understanding, which really seems to be missing. There's very little expertise on Iran in this administration and in this Congress. But Iran, in the past has not cowed to pressure from sanctions or international pressure. In fact, they continue to stand up to it. And I think probably the best person who has articulated this is Professor Rui Ramazani, and he wrote an excellent op-ed which was published in the Charlottesville Daily Progress on this specific issue about understanding Iran's psychology in terms of coercion by foreign powers. The other part of the Bush administration policy towards Iran has really been characterized by the goal of regime change in Iran. And Iran has really been on a list along with a number of other countries in the Middle East, and it was just supposed to be another one along with Syria, Iraq, and a list of 7 countries actually, in which this administration, when they came to power, thought that they were going to come through and replace these regimes and make it a democratic Middle East, a Middle East that was more friendly to the United States. I think also if you look back, this regime change policy is also apparent in the sanctions bills that percolated up through Congress. And there's another element to it, which is through a quote-unquote program to promote democracy in Iran that's funded through the State Department. And so far, the program has gotten over $120 million. But what they have found is that they can't get, it was meant primarily to increase broadcasting to Iran through Voice of America, Broadcasting Board of Governors, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. And then there was another component that was meant to give money to dissidents working inside of Iran to help them, foment a quote-unquote velvet revolution to take down the regime. But the dissidents, most of the dissidents in Iran and those who are part of the movements there have almost nearly universally rejected this money because it's created a serious problems for them. Leading dissidents like Shirin Ebadi and Akbar Ganji have spoken out about this program, as has a number of other prominent leaders most recently, because this is actually a subject right now in terms of foreign operations appropriations that are coming up for next year and the renewal of some of this funding. But they have basically called on Congress. In fact, a most recent letter was published last week with 31 prominent intellectuals signing on, calling on Congress and the President to abandon this program. And that's because the regime in Iran has used this program as an excuse to crack down on women's rights activists and human rights activists. And there, more than 70 women have been charged just for demonstrating, for their own equal rights under Islam, under Sharia law. They're not trying to take down the regime. They're not trying to change Islam. They're just asking for equal rights. They believe that Islam, allows that. But these women have been arrested and charged and detained on national security charges. So more than 70 of them, and they've been calling for this program to be abandoned. But it hasn't quite reached Congress's ears, even though there's really been an effort to try to bring this to their attention. In fact, just last week, I believe it was on July 18th, the Senate Foreign Operations Appropriations Subcommittee allocated $20 million specifically for this program and said that it could not be used for cultural or educational exchanges, that it had to be used for the democracy promotion program. On the positive side, they did include a provision in this bill that calls for a very close examination of the types of broadcasts that are going into Iran. I mean, I think certainly we want to be having a face through that broadcasting, and it's an excellent effort, but there's been no evaluation of the program, and there are some significant concerns about it. Because it has not been balanced or fair. And in fact, a number of the Iranians that I've talked to have said that the news programming is very good, that they get quite a bit from it. But some of the opinion pieces are very tilted, moving towards being, of course, against the regime and trying to foment certain ideas. So on the positive side, this new Senate bill at least has this provision to examine that programming. And I raise these because this is another area where we as citizens have the opportunity to really weigh in, because we can be calling our members of Congress, particularly if they're on an appropriations committee, and working to try to reprogram this funding, to raise this issue. It's not just the idea of attacking Iran that has problems for Iranians. It's also just the mere threat of attacking Iran. It's also this notion of regime change. We really are in this really awful environment that's been created where there's so much mistrust and so much missteps on both sides of the equation. It is on both sides. But we really need to be working as citizens to be pushing for the creation of an environment where diplomacy can succeed. Because even though we are advocating for diplomacy without preconditions as one of the best ways for trying to move forward, we've tried all of these other options. We've tried threats of regime change. We've tried sanctions. Diplomacy is really the way forward, but we also have to realize that this isn't going to solve anything overnight. And this is going to be a long and hard and arduous process. If nothing else, I think that's what these talks over this last weekend prove, that it is going to be very difficult, to get to that point, to allow diplomacy to succeed, and that, sitting in on one meeting, is not the answer to all of our problems. That it's going to take a lot, and it's going to be a lot of back and forth, and we have to come, humbly and respectful and be willing to listen and not just have these as